One of the things I had to do while I was working with a sponsor in a 12-step program was what they called Step 11. Now, Step 11, when you look at it in the program, is actually just conscious contact with your higher power. However, the way that I was asked to perform Step 11 was to do a nightly checklist with my sponsor in which I answered a series of questions. Where was I being affected by fear? Where was I being affected by resentment, selfishness, dishonesty? Did I owe anybody an apology? Was I just focused on myself during the day? Was I thinking about how to serve other people? That kind of thing. And so I want to talk about this because it's really important. I have to tell you that your successful recovery kind of hinges on understanding a few points about this. One is that when you go through those questions, if this is something that you are doing or a practice that you adopt with a sponsor or just on your own, it's really important to recognize that the point is to have contact with your higher power, not your sponsor. That means that when you look at those questions, it is a time of prayerful reflection where you ask and ponder with God, hey, where was I being affected by fear? Where was I being affected by resentment, selfishness, dishonesty? All of those questions are not designed for you to be answering them to a sponsor. They're designed for you to be asking them to your higher power. There's a big difference, and let me explain it a little bit better. This step, this process is intended to allow you to become more self aware. It's an opportunity for you to invite God to the table and say, hey, where am I being affected by these things in ways that maybe I don't notice? And this happens just like we get nose blindness. If you have pets, it's likely that your pets have some kind of pet odor, but we get immune to it. We don't smell it, right? But when company comes over, they might notice it. Or surely you've gone into someone's house and you have felt, been overpowered by maybe a dog smell or something, and you wonder, like, how could they not notice this? But the truth is they have what's called nose blindness. Our brain literally filters out smells that we've been smelling for a long time. And so similarly, there are areas in our life where we are being affected by shortcomings and past traumas and ways that we've adapted and survived in our life that served us once upon a time, but ways that we don't even notice how it's not serving us anymore. Ways that are continually causing us to hold on to suffering or maybe even cause suffering in the lives of others. And we want to be able to be aware of those things that we have kind of a mental blindness to. And so we ask God those questions and ask him to help us see where can we still afford to do some additional healing and still afford to allow him to come in and lift those things from us. And it's not intended for him to come in and shame us, not ever. None of this is intended to be things that add to our burden. All of these things are not intended to hurt us. They're intended to unhurt us and to remove that pain. So as we go through those questions with a higher power and ask, where am I being fearful? Where am I being resentful? It is our opportunity to become more aware and remove that blindness in certain areas. Now, if we look at this the other way around and we're looking at this as somebody just asking you questions and you're answering them, then you are going to give answers based on the limitations caused by your current blindness. So, for instance, at night when I would get into bed and then remember, oh yeah, I have to text my sponsor, and I'd crawl out of bed and I'd get my phone open and I'd go down the list of questions. Nope, not fearful. Nope, not resentful. Nope, not selfish. Nope, not dishonest. Nope, don't know an apology or whatever. I was just doing a quick recap based on what I remembered and how I felt like I moved through the day. I would answer the questions and be done. However, my recovery did not even begin to start until I realized that these are questions I need to be asking God. And I would say it in prayer. I call it a two-way prayer where I would ask and wait to see what my mind came up with. Now, it wasn't some weird, thing where I was talking to God and hearing his voice. But the way it does happen, and does happen still, is I ask the question, where was I fearful, or where am I being influenced by fear? And I just kind of pause and wait to see what comes to my mind. And there's been so many times every day that I do this. My mind does show me something, not in guilt, not in shame, not in horror of, oh, I'm such a bad person, but it's just like, oh, it's an awareness of like, oh, I I didn't even realize that. And this is where we come to the table with honesty, brutal honesty. And I don't want to use the word brutal actually, because that has too much of a negative connotation. But it's just our attempt to be honest and to see things as they really are, and to see things clearly so that we can see areas in our life where we are keeping ourselves from having more and receiving more from God and receiving more from our relationships, because this will allow us to let go of suffering, to be resilient to suffering, to protect against suffering, both for us and for those around us. And it allows us to move into our life in a way that it removes our blindness, gives us that awareness so that we can continue to increase in all of the good things that we want. And it's really important that we don't get it confused. So if you are doing this nightly inventory, either with a sponsor or, like I said, or by yourself, if you've picked up this practice from, things that I've talked about, whatever it is, just know that those questions are intended to be asked in prayer with your higher power so that you discover them. It's not about acknowledging them to somebody. It's about discovering them. So just be careful if you are doing this, especially if you're doing it with a sponsor. Just know that this was never intended to be a conversation and a dialogue between you and another human. If you are working with a sponsor and you report those answers, fine. But just know that this is first and foremost a conversation between you and God, and that is where the healing comes from. I hope that's helpful.